Greetings from Alabama. 40 degrees here, 80 degrees yesterday. So I got to wear a sweat shirt to stay warm down here. I know that tickles the guys north, but this is the way it is in Alabama. What I wanted to do, and I was telling Johnny a little earlier, is I was digging through a box a couple of months ago, and I found a handful of these OA Illustrated Lodge Patch Handbooks, and it brought a smile to my face and reminded me just how important this book was to me as a beginning collector in the early 1970s. And so I thought, this is something a story that needs to be told, because I think we tend to forget what, some of the important things that really changed the hobby for the better. And this is certainly, in my mind, one of them. As I alluded to a little earlier, I'm no expert on this OA Illustrated Lodge Patch Handbook. I really just wanted to use this as a springboard for other people to tell about their experiences. And I was glad that Robert Frizzell could join us tonight, who was there in that same area when all this started. So just to go through what I prepared here. This is Bill. I never met Bill personally, but so this is a picture of Bill on the front of Traderoo magazine, 1973. Bill was a scoutmaster in Sam Houston Area Council. Never met him, but you can see him there with one of the editions of his OA Illustrated Lodge Patch Handbook and his typewriter there. Bill was the Order of the Arrow editor for Traderoo magazine, and many of you may know about Traderoo magazine. It was a publication that started out of Texas, fronted by Randy Pappy Reniger, and I won't call it a rival to the Trader magazine, but it was another national publication to help us to understand what was going on in the trading world out there. And he was the OA editor for this, and so Bill started this, and so we all call this then the Bill Price OA Handbook, I think, just because he was the guy that put the thing out. We all know this as the Bill Price OA Handbook. Borrowed this from Robert from his post on Facebook. This was Bill's first edition, I guess, and frankly, I had never seen one of these. The first one I have was, I think, the next one, a little nicer copy, but I don't even know what's inside this one. Robert can probably tell us, but I'm assuming it also has the same pictures, right, of the lodge patches.
Well, he'd update them as he got newer patches, because his goal was to try and print the most current thing.
Right. So this was the very first one.
Yeah, the very first one didn't have everything pictured in it.
Right. I'm going to show some pictures of that a little later too.
He had borrowed Randy Reniger's collection to photograph for that first one. That was the basis of it.
Yeah.
And so it was missing a lot of stuff. So
right. But it was a great start. And this is where it started, about 1970, 71 era. Now, to kind of do some of this back in the day kind of stuff here, let me just kind of remind us of where this fits as far as publications, national publications, or national references, if you will, particularly related to the Order of the Arrow collecting. We all know the Wob Handbook came out in 52, great publication, illustrated, but frankly, it was dated because it basically listed or illustrated the patches that were available, or emblems, if you will, that were available at the time. So by doing that in 1952, it was a great resource for collectors, particularly advanced collectors, in my opinion, in the 60s. But for us who started later than that, it had very little significance to me as a beginning collector in the early 1970s. In fact, I didn't even know it existed probably until the mid 70s. What then filled that gap later in the 1960s were these little printed publications that many of us have seen through the years, starting with these lodge listings. And these are three that I pictured out of my stuff that were usually handed out at National Order of the Arrow conferences. And essentially were just listings of a lodge number and a lodge name. So they served basically as a checklist. And then along better than that really was what was known as the Blue Book back then. This is a 1967 version, but the Blue Book was really more designed to help you understand what issues each lodge had issued up to that time. Um, there was no illustration. There weren't really any descriptors other than the conventional things of X, F, and S. So, for instance, you might look in a Blue Book, you might look up your lodge, and after that, there'd be three capital letters X, F, and S. And if you knew those designations, you'd know that your lodge had issued an odd shape, a twill flap, and a solid flap. But that's all you got. So you had to know a little bit about that to be able to really use that. And the Blue Book then also just continued to be published through the years. This is the latest one that I actually have. I think that Dave Lubitz put out, but still, again, no illustrations and no descriptors other than the designations that we all knew. Now, fast forward then a little bit more to 1979 when Arapahoe 2 came out, which was a fantastic work at its time, picturing all of the known Order of the Arrow Lodge issues at the time. But again, you go from 52 to 79, and you really didn't have any national references regarding Order of the Arrow collecting that were illustrated. Now, we're going to do a little bit more of that back in the day kind of thing to help put this book in perspective during that time frame. In my opinion, again, we're talking traders and the collectors in the States here, but in my opinion, Order of the Arrow collecting dominated the collecting world in the States during that time. Now, sure, everyone had a little side National Jamboree, maybe a World Jamboree collection, but Order of the Arrow collecting pretty much dominated in my mind, the collecting world. And in fact, most were numbers collectors. And what you would hear as a common greeting at a trading event or a conference or jamboree was, how many numbers you down to? You know, that if you take that sentence out of context, you think, what the heck is this guy talking about? But everybody knew what that meant, you know, back in the trading circles. How many numbers you down to? You know, because most of us were numbers collectors and we were checking off these numbers. This just is a little bit of a time capsule of what all of us probably had if we were collectors back at the time, and that is a numbers need list. I think, you know, if you're willing to admit to it, almost all of us that were Order of the Arrow collectors had one of these. And they would list all of the numbers that you were still looking for, lodge numbers. And if you look, this one came from 1970-71. You'll see the common numbers that were more difficult at that time frame. And if you'll recall, again, no internet, phone, no cell phone. You know, it was expensive to make phone calls, so information was a little bit scarce, kind of slow, and some of the reliability could be questioned because some of the information may have been shared as a part of a trade. So there was certainly a demand for more information, particularly because of this. The secret sauce, in my opinion, in Order of the Arrow collecting at the time was the restrictions that the lodges placed on their patches, their emblems. And this is just a small clip of a couple of things from the Trader 1970-71 era, just giving you an idea just how complicated this might be. Here's from 1970 report from a trader on the Area 1F conference. So this is just a one small area of one of the 12 regions, okay? 211 not restricted, 222 per life, 271 restricted, 539, 3 per life, okay? 388 will issue a new flap in the fall. It will be 2 per life, no trade. Okay. So this is just a small area. Here's just a small area also of region 1. Again, this would be Massachusetts predominantly. 124, 2 per year. Tisquantum 164, 2 per life, no trade. You know, you go down through here. 490 over here was not restricted, but over here it's 2 per year. 539, 3 per life, you know, no trade. You know, 566 was 1 per life, no trade. So you get a feel for the potential complexity, which I think frustrated collectors at the time, because just as an example, my lodge was Pellissippi, Lodge 230, not restricted, 50 cents a piece. So when I went to a national conference and started trying to trade my Flatt for others, let's say I went up to Larry Lane from Nawin and tried to trade my not restricted Pellissippi for his 1 per OA advancement Nawin flap, I would get laughed at because this wouldn't be fair, right? At least in the sense of the non-utopian world of restrictions, this would not be fair. And so this is what complicated Order of the Arrow collecting, and in some fashion created frustration, to the point that a lot of people were speaking out on this stuff. And this is another clip from at the time well-known Southern California collector who threw a little viewpoint into the Trader magazine. And I'll quote, "I believe that if all restrictions were removed, there'd be no reason for fakes, and also cutthroat tactics," spelling, "would cease to exist." So people became frustrated by all of these different and varied restrictions that the lodges had on their patches, and made it difficult for all of us to understand why I can't trade mine for yours, right? Got serious on the lodge level too. So for those of you in Texas, you might remember this. This is the lodge chief of Lodge 150. I think that's Nakona, who writes into the Trader. At the 69 area conference, one member attempted to trade his patch, but was threatened with suspension from the lodge until he got his patch back. So this was serious. And again, created a lot of frustration, which then created demand for us to understand what what was going on out there and how we could level the playing field a little bit. Bill was not the first one to come up with this. This is something I found, again, kind of perusing through the Trader magazines at the time. This gentleman, who some of you may know, I did not, who had who was 24, would have been Shashuga Lodge, I guess, had already started an OA flap restriction book in 1970. The second edition is now available, and I'll have the third edition ready soon. So I think he already understood how fast these things change. I've never seen one of these. If you all have, let us know. But I thought it was interesting that someone else also had this idea. But the real secret here is that Bill not only took these restrictions and tried to publish all the restrictions, but he did it in a format where he illustrated all of the different lodge patches, or tried to illustrate all the ones he could. And as Robert said, he used Pappy Reniger's collection at the time as the basis for the pictures in his original books. I threw this in here because if you ordered one from Bill back then, you might have gotten one of his cards, and you might have also gotten one of these buckaroos. This ought to bring a smile to some of your faces. If you were a member of the Traderoo magazine, then you may remember these. This I don't know what this was for, other than just to publicize the Trader magazine, but this gave you a feel for just how interesting they made this. Texas was certainly the bull shooting state and Traderoo capital of the universe. I just thought that how many of you still have a buckaroo? That'd be the question. But frustration created a demand for a reference that we could all use to help us understand what the restrictions were and help us to level the playing field a little bit. So my personal experience with this was that my first trading experience was in 1974, and it was at summer camp. And a few of the members of our lodge at the time had gone to the 73 Jambo and the 73 National OA Conference, and had come back with, with several Order of the Arrow patches. And we were all sitting around one evening around a table, these guys who were staff members at camp. And they were showing us newbies all these Order of the Arrow Lodge flaps from different lodges. And then this one guy whips out this little red book right here and opens it up. And all of us go, whoa, stop. What is this? This is the Bible. I mean, this is like, oh, so you've got a book that tells you where these things, what these things look like, where they're from, what they're restricted. I said, where do I get one of those? Okay. And so it wasn't long before I ordered one of those. And when I got it in, I believe I memorized the thing before I went to the 75 National Order of the Arrow Conference, so that I wouldn't look so much of a newbie. Here's just a picture of several of the handbooks that he did over the years. As you could imagine, as restrictions and as lodges changed names, numbers, he had to continue to publish these things almost yearly. And I think Robert could probably tell us better, but I counted like 8 different editions over about a 10-year time frame. I think he last did this around 81. And I'm going to show you some examples of some of them going forward. Here's just a picture of one of the ones I had. This will speak to several things. First of all, just the enormity of the work to put this together back in that day, right? Yes, he had Randy Reniger's patch collection to use as the basis, but he also had to find out all of this information. And again, where else could you have had a handbook, literally a book that you could fit in your pocket, that had all of this information, what the patch looked like that you were looking for, the restrictions on it, if there was a restricted or maybe a not restricted trader version, what the name, number, and where this lodge was from. I tell people I learned U.S. geography by studying the Bill Price OA Handbook back in the day. And also, as Johnny alluded to a little earlier, you had a built-in checklist, right? So as you picked them up, you checked the number or you circled it. And then also you had a place to write your notes. And for this guy, he picked this one up at NC1, the 1973 NOAC. He picked this one up, Chief Lone Wolf, at NC2, the 75 NOAC. I happen to know this because this was the guy that I saw whipped out that book. This is actually his book from 1974. I wore my book out. Okay, so much so that I had to 3-hole punch it and put it in a little binder. And I showed this just to show you how valuable it was to me, but also to show you that he tried also to tell you what he was trying to do here, and give some folks credit for helping him along the way. What he tried to do was, first of all, edit to conform to a standard listing as far as the restrictions. So he was trying to give you a feel for what the lodge restriction was relative to what you would expect from other lodges. And he also was trying to give you the most common patch that you might experience in your trading journey out there, maybe at a national conference or at a jamboree. So just to give you a feel from my own book, again, I used this so much that I made my notes in it, checked my lists, and you'll recall me mentioning Bill was the Order of the Arrow editor for the Trader Room magazine. So each, and this was published quarterly. So during each quarterly publication, he would try to update the collectorate that on what changes had been made. So I painstakingly cut these out of the magazine and pasted them in my book, you know, uh, 3 per life, but it is now not restricted. So that I could keep up when I was looking. Thought I would kind of share with you just some of the changes over the years and remind us of just how important this time was as far as Order of the Arrow collecting. This is his 1971 book. Okay. And you'll recall that a lot of lodge, or actually a lot of council mergers were happening. We were downsizing from 12 regions to 6, and because of the lots of council mergers, we had lots of lodge mergers. So a lot of change going on in that 1970 to 1973 timeframe. In 71, we don't have a Lodge 8, right? Mascoutins Racing, Wisconsin. This was from the 74 book, but you had a lot to go. In 71, we didn't have a Sasakas. We had Wawanesa, no patch. Okay. In 71, Susquehannock had chapter flaps. And by the way, his template was to try to show you the flap, which I think was the thing that, again, that you would most likely see out there and want to collect, particularly if you were a beginning collector. Bill would also show you, if he could, if the lodge didn't have a flap, what they did have. And Anarchus 67, we know that did not have a flap in 71. Jeff Morley mentioned to us in a previous talk that the Boathouse Project flap didn't come out till 72. So this was what he listed as the only type issued for Lodge 67. Again, in 71, speaking of Southern California, Lodge 566, no patch available, no information available, but he did list the number because he says it was chartered in 69. Jeff, if you're on, you can verify that, but I would have expected that number to have been chartered in 72 or so. Anyway, he listed it. Okay. But just to show you that there were still lodges evolving during this time. Now, here's an interesting one. The only issue from Lodge 158A. Now, we know this to be a fake at this point, but it was real enough at the time, apparently, to make the book. And I went back and looked at some of the trader publications of the day, and where they were talking about this particular lodge issue, or this particular patch, if you will, this badge. And so somehow it got into the mix as the issue from 158. Now, that's a story I'm sure that I certainly don't know much of, but interesting that it made it into this handbook at that time in 71. Bill also would try to show you the restricted flaps of the day. Again, he would try to show you the most common flap in the listing, the numerical listing. But if there was a restricted flap and a trading flap, he'd try to show you the trading flap in the numerical listing. But then if he had it, show you the restricted version in the back. Again, if the number did not have a flap that fit his template for his book, he'd again try to show you the odd shape. This is a 314 fake. Okay, so again, here's one that made it into the book that was not real. We would consider this to be one of the many I don't know how to say it, but not necessarily real 214s, but this is what was accepted at the time. So again, just some sometimes humorous and sometimes revealing comparisons. 1971, you had Indian Creek, no patch issued for a Lodge 45. Hannigas, no patch available. A tough patch. We all know what that looks like, but they didn't have a patch available. Lodge 48 from Glens Falls, New York, was no trading, and apparently was tough enough that there wasn't a patch available for photo in the 71 book. Again in 71, what's the name? Weatava in Southern California, wasn't around yet. The Lodge out of Indianapolis, wasn't around yet, 21. Wanasa Quinotin from Illinois, not around yet. Okay.
Well, at that time, those lodges numbers, they were like from Chicago and stuff that had
Right.
merged a long time ago. So
that's right.
So they got reassigned to different areas, and so 13 didn't start till probably about 1973. So
that's right. Most of these were a result of those mergers I talked about earlier, council mergers, and then selecting a low number for a new lodge. But again, we think about those as it's just that's the way they are. But 50 years ago, they didn't exist. Here's another page from 71 where 28 was a tough number, 2 per life. Okay. 31 was a tough number, 2 per life, no trading. 35 was a tough number, 1 per life, no trading. The fake has a cut edge. Okay. So good information. And let's see, another one, a couple of ones I put in. 50, our area down here in Alabama, no patch available for photo in 71, no trading. 50 was, if not the last lodge, one of the last lodges to actually have a flap shaped patch. Kaitan from Connecticut, 3 per life, no trading, no patch available. Tough at the time. Now and RAR, I alluded to earlier, Larry, 1 per OA advancement, no trading. And here's another one from California, Topa Topa, 1 per OA advancement, and 1 for climbing mountain. Anybody know that story? Feel free to pitch in. So that's the only one I thought, wow, you get 1 for climbing some mountain out there.
Chiefs Peak.
What's that?
It was called Chiefs Peak in Ventura County. I was in that lodge at that time, and then the lodge chief in 74, 75 at that 75 NOAC when you were there. I was there with you as lodge chief.
How about that? Okay, cool. But again, all 71. Now you go a few issues or a few editions forward in 1973. This is when a lot of those new lodges were surfacing. As a result of those mergers and downsizing from 12 to 6 regions, but still we don't have a Weatava. Okay. And again, here's a guy who's using his as a checklist. Still don't have a 21, a 23, but you now have Malibu. Okay. Not restricted. Beautiful flap. We have Dr. Morley to thank for that. And you now see what a Cherokee 50 would have looked like in 1973. Again, I guess he didn't have a boathouse at the time. This was an interesting one. This was what he had pictured for 155. Again, a very classically tough number. This is the fake. This is one of the many fakes. So it again shows you that information was scarce and kind of slow. So now he corrected that in later versions, and then again in 74. He had to do this about every year because things change so quickly. But now we have Weatava, now we have Willakamik from Indianapolis, 2 per life with the trading flag. Here are some other ones that are of interest. 28, 2 per life, 31, 35 still restricted. But then in this edition, he corrected the 155. That's the real 155. And he also corrected that picture from the fake 314 he had back then. I think that's a real 314 there. So lots of change going on. But Bill brought us a book at a time when many of us as newbie collectors needed a reference, needed something to show what we were looking for as Order of the Arrow collectors, and gave us something that we could use as not only a reference, but as a checklist, and something that would help level the playing field for us as we went out there among the masses, telling us all that their patch was better than our patch because you can fill in the blank from there. That's it. I just wanted to kind of bring some of this stuff to light. It's obviously many of us had experience with this little handbook during the 70s. And certainly if you've got stories to tell, feel free to jump right in. I'd love to hear them.
What year was his last?
81. At least that's what I found. His 8th edition.
Yeah.
I have Robert may know better.
That's definitely the last year he did it.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned on Facebook, he had a son, he had a daughter and a son. The son was in Scouts, but the son kind of went the route of baseball. So he followed, and he became a coach and everything. And he got out of Scouts and out of collecting and stuff after 81. So he just didn't have the interest to do the book anymore. Because the book before 81 was 1977. So he had stopped doing them every year because things started changing so much. Back in the early day, lodges didn't change stuff, and so it stayed that way for a while. So you could do a picture and have, but the big deal with that book was restrictions. That was what made the whole difference back then. Because things could be super hard, and the next day they're not restricted, and they're simple. So the book was never totally up to date. And he made it small so people could put it in their trading boxes and take it with them places.
Exactly.
Robert, do you have anything to add?
I didn't start collecting until 1974, so I wasn't involved in the first few issues of that. And the last 2 or 3 he put out, I was more involved in, but I was just starting to collect. But I sold a lot of those books when I went to functions and stuff. And but then he toward the end, he had some national people that, like a representative from each region, that would sell the books through the mail for him. And so, I was thinking about the other day, I don't really know how many he printed of any of them. I never did think about asking that, but like that first one from 1970, I've seen very few of those. And here's every one of them right here. There were 8 editions. And then the 1971 had 2 printings, but they didn't really change that much. I think I was looking through it the other day. And I think the only reason he had 2 printings in 71 is the first one he put out, he didn't put his copyright date in it or anything. So he added another page to it, and because he didn't really change much in it. So, but a book like that wouldn't work too well now because lodges change things so much. They change stuff weekly, and back then a lodge issued a patch and they kind of stuck with it for a while. They didn't issue so many other things.